The evolution within Tyler the Creator's discography is quite interesting because there's a lot of diversity, there was a lot of changes over the years, and it has been super consistent. Since 2009, he has been dropping albums every single 2 years. So it comes now to a point where like you have this, overall discography where you could dive in, hear a bunch of different subgenres, and really gauge where your favorite project is within Tyler the Creator's discography. So guys, that's exactly what we're going to be doing today, is ranking all of Tyler the Creator's projects, all the way back to 2009 with Bastard, going all the way to Call Me If You Get Lost in 2021. And it's incredible that we're doing this now because it's 10 years almost, like it's just crazy to see where he's been, what types of different sounds he's touched. Plus, if there's something that you guys need to know about Tyler, is that he arranges all of his own music, he produces the majority of his own music, and he writes the majority of his own music. So everything that Tyler does is crafted by him, so it's very focused and precise. But guys, subscribe to us if you have not already. We're going to be doing more discography rankings. We just did one on Kanye and Drake. You guys could access that on the channel. Plus, smash the like button. It helps us to reach more Tyler fans. So Lou, let me ask you, man, like, what's the one word you attribute to Tyler the Creator's discography?
One word, interesting. I would go with adaptive.
That's good.
He always
like
kind of, adapts to a new sound, and he kind of never looks behind. He always looks forward when he's making a new body of work. And this is going to be a cool discography ranking to do, just because Tyler has had projects that vary from immature, I would say, to more developed, and again, that evolution from project to project has been amazing to witness. So thank you to our Patreon members who actually voted for this episode. And this week the options were, what was the last classic rap song, which got 6 votes. Then we had top 5 mixtapes of all time, which got 12 votes. And then finally, ranking Tyler the Creator's discography, which also got 12 votes. And ultimately, we chose to go with the discography ranking because we felt like it was a good time to get through it after Call Me If You Get Lost was still fresh. So if you guys want to have your say in future episodes, head over to the link in the description to this video, and you guys can actually choose every Wednesday episode. So if that interests you, please do check it out.
Absolutely. So going back to the discography, it's very interesting because he switched up his sound a bunch of different times. There's critical reception around certain albums, and then there's not so great reception around other albums. So like starting this discography ranking off, like what's the one thing that you really look for in a Tyler album that you didn't maybe get in other albums, or that the stronger albums on this list possessed?
I never know what to look for because he's always kind of changing it up, and I feel like, especially when you look at like the path of his discography, going from, let's say, Wolf to Cherry Bomb, like Cherry Bomb was kind of a big detour from the progression of his sound as an artist. So he's always surprising me, and I never really know what to go in for, because look at an album like Igor, that shook everybody. Nobody ever thought that Tyler would go into that kind of lane. So let's start this off. We have 7 projects to go through. Let's start off at number 7. And by the way, for this time around, we do have a combined list, and that's been the case for Drake as well. For Kanye, we had our own rankings, but for Tyler's catalog, we kind of seem to go eye to eye for his catalog's placements. So let's start off at number 7 with Goblin, which came out in 2011. This is his debut studio album, and it's interesting to think that most artists, their debut album is regarded as their best, but not really the case with Tyler. So where do you think he falls short, and what are the things that you did admire out of this one?
Well, I think I admired the element of horrorcore that he was able to make in here. It's, like the subject matter is absolutely dark, and it's really gruesome. Not only that, but I also like how, it's also like the whole continuation of Dr. TC. Like, that was my whole thing with it. Like, I love the narration within it. I love the progression, but I think it's too long of a track list. That's my biggest gripe with it. I also think a lot of the content matter has been extremely outdated. Like, I was listening to a lot of it because I rebumped Goblin not too long ago, and I think overall the sounds and the aesthetics that are placed within the album that just haven't aged very well. Not only that, but the tempo is off on the listen. That's a big part for me. Is like certain songs will be 8 fucking minutes long, and then other instrumentals that I want to hear on the album or that I feel as if they deserve more runtime will have a shorter sort of feel to it. So I feel as if there's a consistency issue there, but I have favorites on this album as well. Like example, like Yonkers or She. Like these are songs I still have in my rotation. So I think it's more on the fact that Tyler's discography is so focused that this is kind of the outlier on that end, and you guys are going to see what's at our number 6 pick. I think that this is a downgraded version of the number 6 pick. So take me why you think that Goblin's at the lower end here.
Yeah, I just feel like it's a very, bleak album. I think that it's also Tyler's least accessible because of how long of a listen it feels like. And in terms of the production, the beats aren't all that great. Very uninteresting drum patterns for the most part. I mean, of course, you have heavy use of synths, which is kind of a reoccurring theme in the sounds of pretty much every single Tyler, the Creator project for the most part. Apart from that, I mean, I do like the fact that it's conceptually driven, but at the same time, I feel like I would say the knots that hold the concept of the album together get loosened by Tyler, the Creator, spending too much time rapping about the critics, the people that kind of hated on him for Bastard.
Too, yeah.
It felt bitter. And I mean, of course, he's inspired by Eminem in terms of using horrorcore and kind of the murderous kind of content matter, but he also took a page out of Eminem's book in the sense of like spending too much time addressing your critics and the blog posts that he didn't fuck with. And it just like, if you don't care about it because he's claiming not to give a fuck, then don't spend most of your album discussing it. You know what I mean?
Well, not only that, but I think he doesn't even fuck with this, project as a whole.
He doesn't.
Like he said, like, fuck this, like I can't go back to this and listen to it. And I have to agree with him. But I mean, I do agree with you on the fact that the storyline between Bastard, Goblin, and Wolf does get a bit looser here because, Bastard was kind of like that beautiful introduction to the whole Dr. TC thing. And then Wolf like tied everything in together perfectly. So I think that's why we have Goblin at number 7. At number 6, though, let's actually talk about Bastard. And this came out in 2009. Tyler considers this his first studio album, but it's technically a mixtape, like by the technical terms of it. So I think where Bastard strives is it's just like the raw emotion. Like it's definitely not his best engineered mixtape or let's say project. It's not his best as far as like rapping goes, but it's just like it's the birth of like the Tyler, the Creator persona. Like you're starting to understand what he's gonna go for. You understand, everything conceptually, and that intro track, Bastard, is one of his best in his discography, and it started off in 2009. So why do you think, let's say, Bastard is above Goblin, and what did Bastard do better than Goblin in certain aspects?
Well, I mean, it kind of set up the whole premise, with the counseling sessions that we start off with Dr. TC at the high school, and it feels very engrossing from the start because you're left to wonder, like, who is this character? Why is he discussing these very heavy subjects like rape and murder? Like, why is he kind of have this twisted mindset? Then you learn that he was affected by previous trauma, including, his father leaving him and abandoning him and how that's affected him. So I feel like the construction of the premise was really well handled throughout the project. Not only that, but the project's atmosphere is very eerie, and he did a good job with that. And also the collaborations are much better here than they are on Goblin, in my opinion. For example, Ass Milk with Earl Sweatshirt, that's a fucking slapper. Like that's a song that's really low key and underrated. But apart from that, I just like the fact that it's a very sick and twisted introduction to an artist that had, to me, one of the most entertaining introductions, not more than any other rapper, but one of the most entertaining introductions than other rappers in the 2010s decade who were coming up. Like, it was very raw, it was very grimy to a certain extent, and it shook a lot of people.
It did. It was very controversial for its time as well, because a lot of critics were giving it was very harsh criticism because of the type of content matter he was going after, but it was daring for him to do that because at the time, like, Eminem had it down packed, but a lot of the people that tried to go into horrorcore, it didn't necessarily work out. But for someone like Tyler, especially like even, incorporating like stuff like synths in there, or like, let's say some, classic, like, even some jazz samples at certain points, like that was unseen, let's say in the horrorcore, genre at that point. Another thing I like about Bastard is how, you start to understand the progression of Tyler's mindset as the album goes through. Like, there's nothing really lost within the actual runtime because it's really focused around those, sessions with Dr. TC. And then I'm also going to explain a concept, let's say, that I really fuck with Wolf that kind of ties everything together. But I think just Bastard is it's iconic to his listening experience, and it's definitely a must start. Like, to understand, his full evolution as an artist, which is probably the best aspect of Tyler's discography, you have to start at Bastard, and you really have to have, a full grasp on what he's trying to do.
100%. And I just love the bold attitude that Tyler has throughout. I mean, the cadences are aggressive, and he really builds up that rapping persona that would continue later on in his career. And the production was also pretty good, obviously very inspired by the Neptunes with the glitchy beats, the dazzling synths. I mean, a lot of it is Neptunes inspired, I would say. And I do feel like the mixing and mastering could have been better, which is also the case for another Tyler project that we'll get into later. But unconventional production, pretty good thematic basis to start off the trilogy of Bastard, Goblin, and Wolf. And also like the way that he played around with reverb on this. And one more cool thing I want to mention is that if you look at the song Bastard, he actually manifests himself winning a Grammy, which he won for Igor.
And having all his homies there with his mom.
So
That's crazy.
So the bar was, my goal in life is to win a Grammy. Hopefully mom will attend the ceremonies with all my homies. And 11 years later, he wins the award at the Grammys for the best rap album for Igor. So to see that come full circle and to see him kind of breathe that into existence, like that's a very like full circle moment in his catalog, I think, and it's cool to see.
It is cool to see, and as I said, I think Bastard's actually my favorite intro track to any Tyler project.
Well, really, over Forward?
Yes, I think so.
Over Igor's theme? Man,
maybe.
Come on.
I think it's just a nostalgic factor of it, especially that like it's what is it, 6 or 7 minutes of just pure fucking rapping.
It's a great song.
It's a really nice song, and he was also mentioning on Igor, not on Igor, on Goblin, how Bastard like was sort of like the bandwagon sort of thing for people, and how like that was the song that got everyone hyped up about his discography. So I found that cool too. But let's actually move on to number 5. Let's go to 2015 with Cherry Bomb, and this is a really unconventional project within his discography. This is where Tyler was really looking to, break out of that rapper shell and try to dive into different subgenres, different sounds, different productions. And it was mixed reception around this album because some of his fans really fucked with it. They saw the vision from the get-go and they knew where he was going to go with the rest of his discography. But a lot of people were also sad because the Bastard, Goblin, and Wolf trilogy officially came to an end, and now was a different portion of Tyler the Creator's career. So, do you think Cherry Bomb was maybe the biggest fork in the road for Tyler's career? And isn't it crazy to see the way he was able to execute upon it?
Yeah, it was a big fork in the road because, like, after Wolf, it seemed like there was a clear progression throughout Tyler's evolution as an artist, but once you get to Cherry Bomb, it feels like a complete detour. It's like, okay, he was headed this way, and he made a left fucking turn out of nowhere. And to me, when I first heard this album, I'm like, this is what it must feel like to bring your kid into a music store and just watch him go fucking ballistic. Smash on some drums, pick up a guitar, and just go crazy and really just be messy with the instruments he's bringing in. And that's what we got with a lot of distorted drums, a lot of industrial sounding production, a lot of guitar riffs. And even on the song Two-Seater, it's the first time that Tyler ever actually, was in charge of a live orchestra for the production of that song. So I feel like he's like, you know what? Let me just see what I could do. Let me see my whole range of skills as a composer, as a producer, and bring it into one project. So it was cool to see him experiment, and I did enjoy it, and I think that the project does get too much slack because there's a lot of memorable moments from it. So why do you think it gets, let's say, the polarizing views that it does?
I think it's unconventional. I think that, there's people that will either fuck with, Tyler's rapping or Tyler's, let's say, I wouldn't say pop aesthetic, but, more of his different sounds. I'd maybe put more of his contemporary sort of side to him. And I think that this was the first time that that was ever exposed to his fan base. And I also think that there was such a hardcore fan base for that trilogy that once that initial switch was made, it kind of threw people off. But over the years, you see that it has some of his most memorable tracks. Example, Smuckers. You get that's a top 3 Tyler the Creator song in my book. Like that's like automatically right there. And especially, the progression throughout, the production, and then also like the beat switch, having Kanye and Wayne on the same song. Like there was things that Tyler was doing on this project that no one else was doing in the industry at the time. And I also really appreciate it now because I saw the type of direction that he was going to go with, and I understood the vision. Because it's not like he just dropped this and then necessarily went back to, the old rapping or went back to, let's say, horrorcore. He really took this seriously as like, okay, like you said, let me put out a range of sounds, and then whatever I feel as if is right in the moment, I will go towards it. Another thing, if he doesn't drop Cherry Bomb, you don't get Flower Boy, you don't get Igor, you don't get Call Me If You Get Lost, because this was the first project where I felt like Tyler was really confident in his artistry. He wasn't locking himself into one genre. He wasn't necessarily locking himself into one thematic basis and wasn't necessarily trying to compete in that lane. This was really to be a diverse artist, and I think, he did it super well on this.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I think it's in my mid-discography ranking.
Yeah, I know. It's really solid, and I mean, the production's very bass heavy, and it kind of feels like he's doing whatever he can to make the beats be the loudest component in the song. Like sometimes you'll feel like the beats sound much louder than his vocals, and that's where it kind of seems like the mixing and mastering could have been better, but maybe that was the purpose. Apart from that, it's cool to see that he is grappling with certain themes that are kind of at the core of the album, such as him thinking about the influence that he has as an artist, him also, I would say, trying to find his wing so he can actually, fly off with his wings and see where he wants to go musically, because this was kind of like a shot in the dark.
Yeah.
Let me play around with a bunch of different ideas and see where it guides me for my next project. And then, of course, we got Flower Boy, which was, masterful.
Yeah,
it's
it's definitely in the top end.
Also, on a song like Fucking Young / Perfect, this to me was kind of like the prototype and the preface for what Tyler's singing would develop to be on an album like Igor, because you have the high pitch vocals from Tyler. So it's cool to kind of see how these were kind of some building blocks for later stages in Tyler's catalog. So I loved everything about this, and definitely underrated and definitely gets too much hate despite the flaws that it might have.
It does have flaws, but definitely one of his most diverse projects, if not his most diverse project. But moving into the top 4 now, this is interesting because I feel as if our 1 to 4 could kind of be interchanged.
Not for me. For me, it's the 1 to 3.
1 to 3 more?
Number 4 is kind of, it's in its own lane.
Okay, let me ask you this though. Do you think like a general Tyler fan would agree with me that like 1 to 4 could be interchanged at any point?
A general Tyler fan probably, but I think that like people know what his top 3 is.
People know what the top
I feel
3
like
is?
that top 3 is really solidified. But guys, if you disagree, please let us know, because I'm very intrigued to know.
It's a very complex discography.
You think people have our number 4 at like their number 2 or something?
I think so. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter say that this is like this is more on like the 1 to 2 spot, and I kind of have to agree with them at a certain point. Like for me, this 1 to 4 is very interesting because you could take number 4, you could put it at 2. You could take number 2, you could put it at 4. Like
really?
I wouldn't have a problem doing that because this 1 to 4 is very serious. But anyways, enough with the teasing. Number 4 is Wolf from 2013. A lot of people would probably get mad at us for having it that, let's say in the middle range of things, but I think it's merited because the 1 to 3 is extremely hard to crack in, but Wolf is a great fucking project, especially the way that it was able to tie in all the thematic bases within the whole trilogy between Bastard, Goblin, and Wolf, and then also kind of tie in this overall message in Tyler's discography that's been prominent within, his music for years now. And just listening over Wolf again, because I did the re-listen today, man, what a fucking album. Like, this is everything that Goblin should have been, but more composed, better timed, a better feel and listen, for the overall track list, more memorable tracks throughout it. So why do you think Wolf is so strong? And, how did it tie in perfectly to the rest of the thematic bases that were made within Bastard and Goblin?
So to start off, I just feel like I have Wolf and Cherry Bomb in their own league, and then I have
okay.
his most recent 3 albums, which to me is one of the best 3 album runs that I've witnessed in a long time. And of course, we'll get to that in our top 3. But speaking on Wolf, I love how it ties up the trilogy as, you have Sam and Wolf at the Camp Flog Gnaw, and, seeing how the evolution of Dr. TC, who we now know is a fragment of Tyler's consciousness, seeing that character, being brought back in and seeing how everything ties together was really well executed by Tyler. I also feel like rather than being dark and confrontational like he was in his other projects, here the production is more nuanced. The compositions are lighter, they're brighter, and he really, I think, like, he set a very different mood, and this was a big stepping stone in his evolution because the writing got more complex. The writing got more mature. I mean, if you look at a song like Colossus, very similar to, let's say, a song like Stan, where Tyler is at an amusement park and, he's having a horrible experience as fans are coming and rushing into him, wanting autographs, wanting to speak with him, and he's kind of grappling with, I would say, the downsides of fame. So to see him give us a storytelling cut like that was very different. And also the song with Erykah Badu, I think it's called Tree Home 95 or something.
Yeah,
that
really
song's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Man. Not only that, but on something like Slater, where he actually personifies his bike as someone.
That was cool.
That was super cool as well. And I also love the tempo switch at the end of the song where you get Frank Ocean vocals. That was awesome. I want to go into Parties in Dover, Campfire, and Beamer. It was so cool to see the way that he was able to take, an 8-minute track like maybe we saw on Goblin or Bastard, but now instead of having, excuse me, instead of having, let's say, like one full instrumental, not many, changes or progressions within the track, there's 3 different tracks in one now, and it actually serves into the overall concept of the album. So I think that this is really the point where I think Tyler refined his skills, if you have to ask me. Like, this is where, like, you could start to see where he was getting the knack of producing these studio albums, and you could go through the track list. It's super coherent. It's a super nice listen, even for a vibe, right? Like, Wolf has some very dark content matter, just like Goblin and Bastard, but it's packaged different. It's lighter for the listener. It's more accessible. You know, you could go back to Wolf now in 2021, and it still feels new. It still feels as if it's a refreshing project within Tyler's discography, as if, you know, maybe Bastard or Goblin, like, doesn't necessarily have that replay value that Wolf has. Not only that, but as you were saying, tying in that whole thing was massive, because then you also know what Tron Cat does. Now you know what Ace does to his mental, and how they're all kind of different personas within his own imagination, and how, you know, him like killing maybe Jasper and other, you know, Odd Future characters, you know, in previous projects was just a figment of his imagination. Another thing that's really cool about this, it's the first time you really see him dive into the love triangle thing that you see in future projects. So, I mean, it was such a big stepping stone for him, and I think as a project and the way that he was able to refine after his first two, major W in his discography.
100%. And like I said, the songwriting really improved here. Also on the outro Lone, I thought that was really well done, as he's kind of going through how he's grieving over the loss of his grandmother. And I like how you brought up the fact that, like, this is the first concept album from Tyler where he really dives into, you know, relationship drama, because that ends up being kind of a cornerstone in Tyler's projects, and it's something that really flourished, I would say, on this project. But let's get into the top three. Of course, this top three includes Flower Boy, Igor, and Call Me If You Get Lost. I didn't give you the order there, but just let's talk about the fucking 3-album run that this is, man. Like,
That's
this
facts.
is phenomenal. You get 3 different sides of Tyler, and again, the progression from one of these projects to the next always amazed me. And at number 3, this might surprise people, but I don't think it will. It's Call Me If You Get Lost, which got released in 2021. And yeah, this kind of felt like a mixtape to me. You have the DJ drama narration. You have Tyler bragging. You have a lot of braggadocious bars, probably the most that we've ever gotten before from Tyler. But you still have all of these songs kind of in the webbing, I would say, of a concept album. Even though it's maybe slightly looser than Igor or Flower Boy, it's still within that realm. So what made you appreciate this, and why is it one of the better albums of this year?
Tyler Baudelaire, I think that's probably my favorite aspect of it. I love how he was able to, you know, sort of personify this new version of Tyler in a rap album, because with Igor, you didn't think that he was going to go back to rapping, especially how successful it was. But, you know, once you got Lumberjack, you understood what he was trying to go after, and you're like, okay, you're getting like a Wolf Part 2 here. You know, you're going to get something that's really hip-hop based, and you're going to get something that's, you know, really, you know, centered and, you know, I would say focused around Tyler's rapping, you know, capabilities. Not only that, but I love how easy of a listen this is, because, you know, you're in Geneva, Switzerland with Tyler. You know, you're there, and, you know, you're going on vacation with him. You know, you're going through the whole love triangle again with him, you know, from start to finish. And then you only get the whole story, you know, from Wilshire. But then the beginning of the soundtrack, I believe on Corso, actually reveals to you what happened. So there's kind of like a Pulp Fiction moment in it. So it was cool to see the way that he was able to tackle similar subject matter that you would have seen on albums like Igor or even Wolf, but he did it in a different twist now with different sounds and different production. And I mean, again, like, just the consistency in the track list is fucking amazing. I mean, Hot Wind Blows, Corso, Safari for me is fantastic. Wilshire, like, there's some of his best written songs here for me. And overall, I mean, it's just been such a standout of my listening this year. Like, definitely top 3 of the year for me.
Yeah, it definitely is up there for our top albums of the year. But, you know, my opinion on Call Me If You Get Lost is that it was the perfect album for Tyler to make at this point in his career, because, you know, some will say that he backpedaled from Igor, but I don't think he did, because this is the best rapping that I've ever gotten from Tyler, the Creator, on an album. I think that the cadences have been improved, the flows are better, he sounds hungrier, and I also feel like this is his victory lap album. This is him kind of admiring all the glory around him that he's worked for. Not only that, but it's cool to see Tyler really embrace this Tyler Baudelaire character, who's, you know, this rich poet who's living a life of luxury, and realizes by the end of it that there's no amount of money that can truly buy love. And that's kind of the main message, I would say, that I got within the album. Not only that, but the production was phenomenal. I think that more than any other Tyler, the Creator album, Call Me If You Get Lost creates atmosphere and creates setting, and it really transports you into another world better than any other Tyler album, because even if you look at a song like How Wind Blows, you have this Japanese bamboo flute, and you literally hear sound effects of wind blowing, putting you on the scene with Tyler, with DJ Drama on this boat in Switzerland. So the way that he was able to capture a mood, capture a setting was marvelous to me, and feature performances were crazy. Think about Domo Genesis. Think about Uzi. Everybody did their thing.
NBA Youngboy was fantastic too.
Yeah, and to see Tyler really return to that hardcore style of rapping that a lot of his fans fell in love with, it was just a beautiful return to form.
It was a beautiful return to form. And I think that it would have been a mistake for him not to go into this area, because it offers so much diversity within his discography, right? Like, he really didn't touch a rap album, a strict rap album, but you kind of say there's outlier tracks that sort of follow suit with, the same aesthetics that you heard on Igor. But for the most part, like, this was something that you haven't heard maybe since, like, Wolf, or even, let's say, Cherry Bomb, if you want to say it's like strictly a hip-hop album. Like, whatever it is, like, this was one of the most focused albums that I've gotten in years from him, and I mean, just a big standout for me this year. But let's go into the top two, and at number 2, we have Flower Boy.
Meaning that number 1 is Igor.
Yeah, we'll get into Igor after this, but what makes Flower Boy so special as a listen? And I also feel as if this is the first time where, like, Tyler delivered, like, potentially, because it still hasn't gotten there, a classic. Like, this is probably going to be like the first project out of his discography that we can maybe have a conversation around a classic.
This was also the first time for me that, like, I put a Tyler the Creator album as an album of the year contender. It was the first year where I could really truly, give him that title potentially, and this album just blew me away. I think that it's beautiful. I think that it's really somber, and it's really an adventure for Tyler, where he's trying to find self-discovery, and he gives you these diary-type confessions where he's depicting the most human version of himself that we've ever gotten before on a Tyler album. And a couple of interesting facts that I jotted down is that a lot of the songs and productions on this album were actually meant for other artists. For example, Schoolboy Q turned down the instrumental for Who Dat Boy. You also had the song Glitter, which was originally written for Justin Bieber, who was ignoring Tyler for some reason. After that, I Ain't Got Time, that was an instrumental that was meant for The Life of Pablo, which Kanye turned down, and also Nicki Minaj was handed that beat too. She also turned it down. So it's cool to see how Tyler kind of envisioned these instrumentals, or maybe the songwriting for these tracks for other artists, but ended up making it work into one very cohesive album. And this is truly Tyler the Creator flourishing as an artist. This is him coming to terms with who he is, and it was very revealing as he kind of opened up about his sexuality, and also used metaphors like a garden shed to represent how he felt like he was trapped in a closet, and that there was no real way to get out of it until he was able to reveal it on this album. So for how personal Tyler was on this album, I think this is the most personal that he's ever been, and the production is lush, the features all killed it, and it really is Tyler finding himself as an artist and finding the full potential of his sound for me.
And he blossomed. I think that's what Flower Boy means. He blossomed. Like, this was really like, this is Tyler the Creator. This is what you guys were wanting for all these years. This was me. No thematic bases, let's say, within, let's say, a character, or let's say, I'm not trying to, like, really not experiment with my sound anymore. I'm just trying to be me. I'm trying to make something that I fuck with, and I'm trying to put subject matter in this album that I really like. And again, a song like Garden Shed, like, think about how many people, have heard that song and how it's had a positive impact on people.
A lot of people.
It's not hard, bro. It's really hard, to be able to touch upon those subjects and, feel confident while doing it, and, feel confident to be able to, show that true side of yourself. But Tyler was always the one that kind of, steered away from that because of, earlier projects. He got a lot of backlash because of the things he said or the things he did. But it was like here, it was a complete 180. Now it was like he was embracing that part of himself, and it was kind of like a thing where he admitted where, he always wanted to say this part about himself, and he always wanted to show it. So I love that too. And listen, Who Dat Boy, another song that, for me, classic. Like that's a song where you see the chemistry of A$AP Rocky, and you see the chemistry, between him and another artist come to, full circle together. And the concept of him flowering and him fully blossoming within this album was beautifully executed. Like, it's such a calm production as an album. It's also a great fucking listen. It's probably one of his shortest too. It's only 47 minutes in contrast.
14 songs, right?
14 songs only, yeah. And in contrast to, let's say, other albums of his that are like an hour and 20 minutes. So even one of his most concise and, let's say, structured track lists as a whole for me.
And it was also cool to see him kind of trade those edgy bars that he had earlier on in his career for more conscious lyrics. For example, went from statistic to millionaire, CNN doubted because my skin is dark. And also another bar was, how many riots can it be until then Black Lives Matter? So to see Tyler get into a conscious bag as well was super refreshing. Also, he's just very self-aware. Throughout the album, he kind of sets the stage early on for a project about him expressing his true identity, loneliness, and also just him grappling with the fact that he's ahead of his peers in terms of his career. Also on the song November, he also got super introspective, rapping about how, like, you know, what if my music is too weird for the masses? What if people don't accept me for my quirkiness? And ultimately, he decides that that's where he strives, is being out there, is being different than the herd. And that's why I think he's built one of the most loyal fan bases of the 2010s decade. Not only that, but the production on this album is phenomenal. I mean, if you look at Where This Flower Blossoms, the orchestral strings on there, if you look at the funky bass line on 9/11, Mr. Lonely, you have a song like Who Dat Boy that feels like it's a horror score. I mean, everything is very diverse, but yet I feel like in terms of capturing one mood that's cohesively there for an entire album, Flower Boy does that the best.
Facts. That's major facts. Like that's what I was saying. Like I really do think that this is his most structured track list out of any other one of his albums, and it's because of, you know, the way that he tackles these things and the different production choices he chooses, but the way that those production choices actually match the overall tempo of the album. Like, you know, think about it. Like you don't want a forward beat for all 14 songs. You know, you don't want to necessarily have a 9/11 for all of these songs. Like there was so much diversity within the production choices, and another big strong suit is that dude, like he handles all of this, like he's the one crafting it. That's so important because Flower Boy has that Tyler touch. It has the touch of, you know, Grace. It has that Midas touch where it's so different that it almost feels so relatable. Like that's the way I feel about Tyler's music, and I think that Flower Boy it's what really kicked it all off for me. Like before Flower Boy, you kind of considered Tyler a rapper, kind of a one-dimensional rapper that, okay, you know, he made good concept albums, he made albums that were nice and that came full circle. He experimented a bit, but not too much, and then you get this, you know, Flower Boy album, and it's a complete 180 from anything he's ever done.
And this made people say he's one of the best in the game right now. Like that was the kind of conversation that he was being thrown in after releasing Flower Boy. But speaking about Tyler's artistic evolution, at number one we have Igor, which to me is a flat-out masterpiece. I think it's one of the best albums of the 2010s decade, period. I really do feel that strongly about it. And it's so crazy that when Tyler finally gets that mainstream recognition and love from, let's say, the Grammys, he ends up winning, you know, the Grammy for Best Rap Album for his first non-rap album. I mean, yes, there are brief moments of, you know, hip-hop elements, but for the most part, he's really tackling pop, funk, and R&B, and also some neo-soul. So to even label this as a rap album to me was offensive, but nonetheless, it was cool to see him get that love. And to me, listening to this album, it feels like seeing Pikachu evolve into Raichu. You know what I mean? It felt like this is the fucking peak of Tyler's evolution as an artist. Like
That's
this
true.
is the peak, because for all of his career, we knew him as this rapper, but now he's fucking singing on this whole thing, and he's singing using the synthetic high-pitched voice that isn't meant to sound good, but he makes it work and he pulls it off because you're so immersed into the concept of this album, into this character of Igor, who's kind of like this Frankenstein, but he's put into a situation where he's forced to feel emotions. He's forced, you know, to actually cry tears. You know what I mean? So to see him make a character that's not supposed to be human, very human, that was amazing to me. So why do you think this is Tyler's best? Let me start off like that.
Okay, the concept was perfectly executed. That like the whole progression of the track list was really well done because you start to see the love triangle that Igor is placed within, and then it's cool because, you know, it's not your traditional love triangle. It was more of a thing of like, Igor was having to face with the anxieties and doubts of himself while, trying to maintain, the relationship with another man. And then you find out that that man is actually falling back in love with his girl. And then, it kind of creates that anxiety and doubt throughout the whole album that you feel as the listener, but then is kind of backed up with this super fantastic, like, let's say, bright and sort of energetic, neo soul production. So it was also like, there was a lot of contradictory factors within this album for me. Not only that, but I mean, when was this ever done? In hip hop, let's say. All right, fuck it, we'll call it hip hop. When was this done? I've never seen it. It's one of the most diverse albums that I've seen from the 2010 decade. Again, arranged by Tyler, produced by Tyler, and written by Tyler. It literally says on the album cover. So I also think that this was not only the peak, but this was maybe the peak for experimental hip hop albums.
I don't even know if I can call it a hip hop album.
I don't know if I could call it hip hop, but I could see how people might place this in the experimental sort of category because of all the different types of genres and meshes together. But overall, I think that also this is only 40 minutes of runtime. That's super concise. Again, a problem that I had with his older projects was too long, dragged on a bit too much, and there's a lot of unnecessary filler in there. This with Igor, it's legitimate, 40 minutes of a pure story with beautiful production. So it also makes me feel as if I'm almost watching a Disney movie. That's kind of the way I feel about it. Is like I'm watching, Tyler the Creator's version of, like, let's say, Cinderella. That's kind of the way I feel as if going through with it. And of course, the features on this album are probably some of the best in his whole catalog. So
I also think
that's for me.
I also think it's his best produced album. I mean, if you look at the dazzling synths that play a very heavy role into it, if you look at the way that he mastered the use of these dreamy instrumentals with this very, I would say, 70s funk vibe, that was really well executed, and you have electric guitars ringing off and just amazing track progression. I also love the way the songs are structured because it's kind of unconventional. You'll get some songs with bridges and verses, some songs that are kind of just one long extended hook. And I also think that the memorable moments on this album really stand clear in the totality of his discography. Think
facts.
About Lil Uzi Vert singing on Igor's theme. When I first heard that, I'm like, who the fuck would have thought that Uzi could sing like that? Not only that, but the climax of the synth keys at the end of that song mixed in with this disco bass that you have. Like, this album felt very 70s, very 80s with the synth pop inspiration, and Tyler just executed perfectly. I also love the symbolism that he uses throughout the story. For example, if you look at New Magic Wand, he's talking about a gun. The wand is kind of representing a gun, and how he wants to take this third party, the girlfriend of his lover, out of the picture by using that wand. Then you have a song like A Boy Is a Gun, where he's talking about how this love interest of his can actually just shoot him down and, tear him apart just by ending the relationship. So to see the progression of the story from song to song, never strays away from the focus, and then to see the emotions of a character who's kind of robotic, not supposed to be human, to see that character gain life through Tyler's writing and through his singing and crooning. It was amazing to me.
It was definitely amazing. I also like this about the track list. I just kind of noticed something. Like, it's cool because the whole progression of the track list kind of follows, like, Igor's emotions and how he progresses as a character. But I feel as if Earthquake is kind of like that first time that, like, he feels love for how grand it is. Like, kind of like, you shake my world and, like, there's no one that'll do it ever like you. And then, you kind of think that there's going to be this positive messaging in it. But Tyler loves to do this. He loves to kind of, like, crash the party with his albums and kind of has, like, a disaster twist at the end. And then you get Are We Still Friends at the end, that kind of leaves Igor asking this guy, could we still be friends at the end of all this, and can we still be, connected, but maybe not in that way. So it was cool to see how, everything kind of came full circle and how he took previous concepts from different albums and just threw them in here, but did it much better. It was much more concentrated, was much more daring as an artist. Like, there's no artist that has done this in this way, and that's what I think is groundbreaking about Igor, and that's why I think it deserves the number one position. So Lou, let me ask you this before we end this off. Like, what makes his discography so good, bro? Like, why is this considered in the upper echelons of the 2010s, and why do you think people appreciate Tyler's discography so much?
A lot of people kind of, would call Tyler the modern day Kanye West, in the sense that it feels like he's truly reinventing himself with every album. He's never, taking steps back, always forward, always thinking ahead. And like with an album like Igor, for example, it was cool to know that he really stepped out of his comfort zone and broke that mold of being, labeled as a rapper. You know what I mean? Like with this album, I feel like he's also encouraging other artists to really go into other territory, kind of explore different avenues musically. And that's what Tyler represents, is kind of going against the grain, doing things that aren't really traditional, but finding yourself in areas that you're not comfortable. And that's what Tyler does. And he's done that brilliantly, throughout his entire career. And at this point, it's like, I don't even think he's like 30 years old yet. So if he's given us a body of work this solid at this point, there's so much more in store.
There is a lot in store for him, and it's crazy that he started off this amazing discography only, I think, at like 17 years old. I believe that's when Bastard came out. So it's cool to see the way that he's been able to progress as an artist, and the way that he's been able to play around with different projects and ultimately deliver one of the best catalogs in all of hip hop for the 2010s. So guys, we hope you enjoyed this discography ranking of Tyler the Creator's discography. There's a lot of great projects. If you guys haven't heard, let's say, a certain album throughout this list, please do so again. And if you have the chance, go from Bastard, go all the way to Call Me If You Get Lost. It's an incredible journey. I just did it. It's fantastic seeing the way that he's progressed as an artist and the way that, he's changed stuff up. So subscribe if you have not already. Smash the like button if you have enjoyed this discography ranking. And, let us know your ranking for this. Let us know, how you feel about his discography. What's your favorite songs? Anything you want to do. We love having conversations with you guys. Thank you so much for watching this, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thank you for watching the video. It's always a pleasure doing content for you guys. Listen, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, because we're doing album reviews, and we actually have our series called Everything We Know, where we take you guys through the whole album rollout of the hottest releases of the year. Not only that, guys, but our Patreon plan is now live. You guys can access that in the bio. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.